in this commit, I'm basically just going to add a whole bunch more content. Oh, you know what? I forgot to save my commit from last time. So I'll do that. And in the last one, I just styled the sections. And I'm not going to push that up to GitHub yet. I'll make another commit first. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat, actually. I'm going to copy, basically I'm just going to be adding a section, sort of like an actual portfolio section of different projects I've worked on and everything. I'm just going to copy and paste it right in here from what I was working on before, just because, time is precious and everything. Let's see. So my alignment is off. That's really going to bother me. So now would maybe be a good time to talk to you about alignment. And that's still off. Let me see if I can figure out why. Okay, that looks much better. So you'll notice that like I'm very big on all of my indentation and everything in here. The reason for that is because, well, let's take a look at this without all that indentation, which Adam makes very easy. Okay, so if I were to save this, the page still works, but look at how much more difficult it is to tell what section this header is inside. Uh, I mean, I can still sort of figure it out if I read it very carefully, but it's not really easy to tell. It's also not easy to tell that this P is inside the header. So what you do is you use sort of visual cues by indenting things. For instance, I'm going to select everything that's inside this header tag, and I'm going to indent it one over. This image, it's inside this div tag, so I'm going to indent it one over. Uh, this header is all inside this hero section, so I'm going to indent that over. Incidentally, the way I'm indenting these things so easily is because in Atom, if you select multiple lines and then hit Tab, it indents it to the right, and if you hit Shift Tab, it indents it to the left, which is super convenient. Then I'm going to do that for, well, I could do that for everything in the body as well, but I think you're seeing what I'm going for here. This indentation is one of the easiest things you can do to make your code look very high quality and therefore very employable and very professional. And for some reason, it's something that people always neglect, even though it's one of the easiest ones in the world. At the very least, what you can do is you can select everything in Atom. You can select all, so that's Command A on a Mac, and then you can look for this auto indent feature right here. And if you click on it, look at that. It indents everything very nicely for me. The only thing I'm going to change is I'm a little anal retentive, and I like to have my head and body indented inside the HTML tag as well. So there we go. That's my spiel on indentation. As for what this content is that I actually added, basically it's just a bunch of text about all these different projects I've worked on. Right now, this looks pretty ugly, but I'll worry about getting all the content in there first. I can worry about styling it later. So I'm going to do the HTML first, the CSS later. One thing I would like to have in here is images for each of these projects. So for instance, this Angular one, I'd like to have the logo for Angular right there. For this one, I'd like to have Node. For this one, I'd like to have Ruby. So that's what I'm going to do next. Before I go there, I should point out that all of these guys, this is all inside a UL or an unordered list. That's because, I mean, I could do divs or anything else that I want, but I like to be semantically appropriate. I like to use elements that really explain what this content is doing. And this really is a list of different projects that I have. Similarly, inside here, each of these are all lists of the technology that was used inside those projects. So I could have used div, I could have used, I don't know, really any other tag that I want. I could use sections, but I'm using lists here because that's more sort of semantically correct. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in all of these images, which I handily have right here. Angular, Node, Ruby. Now I'm going to start getting rather a lot of images when I put them all in here. So just to sort of tidy everything up a bit, I'm going to create an images folder, and I'm going to put all of these guys, all of my images inside that folder. That is, for one thing, going to break this. So that's not going to work anymore. Just got this weird brown sun looking thing. So I'm going to need to change this to say it is now inside the images folder. So I'm going to say images slash for inside the images folder. And that will fix this, but my awesome mustache picture in the back, that's not there anymore. So I'm going going to need to change this as well. There we go. That should be that taken care of. And now I can add in all of these other little technology images. So that's what I'm going to do next. Let's see. So where should I put those? I'll put them up here. So I'll say image source images slash angular.png. Oops. And then I'll just copy and paste that. Do the same thing for node. This is the node logo. And same thing down here for the Ruby logo. And now if I refresh this, I get this awesome looking thing. Well, truth be told, it doesn't look that bad, but I've got all these weird little dots over here because lists by default have everything with bullet points, so I'm going to have to get rid of that. So that's what I'm going to do next. Let's see. Okay, so in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I would like these things to not have all these dots and stuff. So that's the very first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to add h2 tags up here. I'm going to say that, I need a prompt, magnetic HTML, those are all h2 tags. I'm going to say they should be 24 pixels, a little bit smaller than h1's. Give them a line height of 40 pixels, still bold though. Let's see what that's looking like. Okay, that's looking better. They're also all links. When you click on those, it takes you to the web page for those projects. So I'm going to say that every A, anchor, or link should have a color of 58B, which is sort of a nice blue. And then when you hover over it, it will be a darker blue, 369. Okay, there we go. So those are looking pretty good. I'm also going to change these technologies, these things right here, because I want these to show up all in a line. I actually don't want them to show up as this sort of bulleted list. So I'm going to scooch down here. Notice that I sort of like to keep things together. I have my classes here, and then I have all my not classes up here. I'm going to do something for let's see. So these are inside these things with a class of list. I'll say every list item inside anything with a class of list should be displayed as inline. So displayed as inline means just display it like regular old text. Don't display it as like, well, okay, so now it might be a good time to talk about the difference between inline and block level elements. Everything that sort of expands to fill the width of the page as you're looking at it is a block. So for instance, this right here is a block, and this right here is a block. If they weren't blocks, if they were inline, then it would say Robert, aka Robin Thomas, full stack web developer, all in one line right here. But because they're both blocks, it's saying that they should both sort of have their own layer horizontally on the page. Before these guys down here, these are all blocks by default. Notice they're all on top of each other. I don't want them to be blocks. I want them to all sort of flow in together nicely. So I'm going to change them to inline. Pretty much every element on a web page is either inline or block or inline block. So that's inline dash block. Maybe I'll talk about that later on, but for right now, I'm just going to stick with inline. And let's see, I also want these guys to be bold. And then I'm also going to say that I want each one to, I'm a big fan of correct punctuation, so I'm going to put commas but after each one. But now I've got this dangling comma out there at the end. Don't want that. So I'm going to say apply it after each one of these list items, except not the last child. So when I say last child, I mean the last one inside each of these things with the class of list. So you're going to hear us talk about parents and children a whole lot. The parent of this list item is this unordered list right here. And this unordered list, these are its for children. So I'm saying that the last child, or rather everything that is not the last child, should have these commas. And there we go. That looks much better. So that looks pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to make these images show up more nicely and get rid of these dots and everything. That'll be in the next commit. But for right now, this is looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and make a commit. And then I'll say added content for portfolio section. I'll push that up. And then I will also push that to GH pages so that I can just look at it, make sure it's looking all pretty.